it's almost like the old show House MD. He was such a dick, but he could get away with it because he was such a brilliant doctor that it's like if he was just an average doctor, he would have been fired. In this final episode from my broad-ranging conversation with Lee Jussim, Distinguished Professor of Psychology, I asked the professor if his own field is a Ponzi scheme. Enjoy.
Yeah. So I mean, as far as I can tell, most hierarchies are, when they're functional, everyone is getting something. The people at the low end are benefiting from something that is being produced in the hierarchy. Just consider an academic lab. You know, you have the PI on top, and there might be postdoc or graduate students working with them. Then you have undergraduates and maybe a lab manager. So then you total hierarchical structure. Well, so what, are the people at the low end simply being exploited? Well, some people might say yes to that, actually. But in a functioning lab, what would be happening is the PI and the grad students will be helping the undergrads both develop skills, build their resume, and get into graduate school, professional school, medical school, law school. So they will be providing opportunities for the people at the low end to accomplish the things that they want to accomplish. That would be what's happening at that end. And from the standpoint of the faculty, PI, and the grad students, whether it's in academia or anywhere else, and I think non-academic jobs are, probably about half my students have ended up in non-academic jobs, and almost every one of those are really, really happy doing what they're doing. I see no, if you want to go into academia, great, go in with your eyes open, know what you're getting, and if that's what you really want to do, you should do that. But just stepping back, if I had to guess, it might even be better outside of academia. But I love my job. I don't, but just in general, looking at the people who've gotten academic and non-academic jobs, again, it's different. You have different dispositions. But the key is to find what you think will make you happy. But getting back to the hierarchy point, a PI that is doing his or her job well, it's going to, same thing for the graduate students, be preparing them and giving them resources or making the resources and opportunities available that permit them to enter professional fields in a way that they would like and find satisfying. That's a functional hierarchy. It doesn't mean there's no exploitation or self-interest involved. Yeah. So, ideally, there's a confluence of self-interest. That's ideally how hierarchy should be.
Yeah, okay,
work when it's functioning well.
That's a perfect segue into that. So I would argue that in a lot of ways, not just psychology, but basically any academic field that doesn't have ready market applications. So I'm not talking about engineering, pharmacy, economics, things like that, actuarial sciences, not talking about that, stats, not talking about that. But fields like psych, sociology, English literature, those, and anything ending in studies. It's like you've been the chair of your department. When your department has launched an ad, a posting for a new tenure track position in social psych, how many applicants do you tend to get?
100 plus or minus. It could be as many as 150. Yeah, it doesn't usually exceed 200. It's it's like between 80 and 150.
Well, okay, I thought it was multiples of that. I thought it was 4 or something. Okay.
No.
Okay, so let's say 100. One gets the job, right?
Yes.
So that's a bad ratio.
Occasionally 2. Once in a while 2.
Okay. And the thing is, you're not competing with just anybody. Every person, if you're one of these people, every person, you and every one of them that you're competing with is either 2 months away from getting their PhD, has it, and many will have a minimum of 1 postdoc. So you're competing against very accomplished people, and only 1, max 2 goes home happy. Let's say 98 go home unhappy. And what is typical in a psych lab? For a tenured professor, what will they have? Anywhere from 3 to 6 graduate students plus postdocs at one time?
Yes. It's 0 to 2 postdocs. Probably the mode is 0. The mean is probably half a postdoc. Okay. But 2 to 6 grad students. Yeah,
that's call it 4 or 5 total.
Yeah.
So that's 4. So that's a 4 or 5 to 1 replacement level thing, but it's even worse than that because tenured profs stick around for a very long time. And so they're not going to be leaving in a year or two. And then the universities have been economizing for years, like they're having bigger classroom sizes, getting grad students, postdocs, sessional adjuncts. They're doing it all, by all appearances, they're avoiding hiring new tenure track positions to pretty much the best of their abilities. And so to me, this seems kind of like a Ponzi scheme because it's like a multi-level marketing thing where we need people on the bottom to keep the system running.
Look how awkward it is in here right now.
And it's if you actually get tenure, you need graduate students because if you don't have many, your lab will greatly underperform, which will will make you look bad. And
yes.
And if you don't have tenure yet in your tenure track, oh God, you need those workers.
Right. So all of that is true. There are other things going on though. So there are tons of universities, colleges and universities that don't have graduate programs, right? That aren't producing grad students that will eventually need their faculty replaced. So the pool of potential is not restricted to departments that have graduate programs. It is broader than that. But your basic take is, I think, is right. You mostly have shrinkage that colleges and universities are looking to save money, and so either they're hiring less or a lot of they're losing tenure research-oriented positions and becoming non-tenure track teaching positions, which pay less and less security. That's even within the academy. So I think your description, and it certainly is your characterization of the dynamic whereby to succeed at a research-oriented university, the faculty need graduate students just to continue to be productive. I think that's absolutely correct also.
And it's cheap labor for them, extremely cheap.
Yeah. I mean, in some sense it's free. Like it's not free to the university, but typically the faculty don't have, if you have a grant, you may pay a student off the grant, but it's really the university typically paying this.
Well, so what's a typical psych stipend for a year right now at Rutgers? Maybe high 20s?
Yeah, it's like mid to high 20s. It's like 25 to 30, somewhere around there. That's exactly right. But it actually costs the university more than that because it's health benefits and other fringe benefits.
Okay, so the total package would be, let's say, 28 grand, plus you guys have outstanding health insurance. So that's, I don't know. What is that worth? Like $6 grand? I don't know.
Yeah, it's something like that. Like that.
And then
there's other fringe benefits.
And then
then they get free.
So let's say combined, let's say 40 grand total value for everything.
It's something like that. Yeah, that's ballpark.
And then you divide it by how many hours they're working on either TAing or researching. They're probably making somewhere in the ballpark of minimum wage.
Yeah, that's probably right.
And these are
That's probably right.
These are people that were able to get into PhD programs. Like they're smart.
Yeah.
And they work hard.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. Yeah. Yes. So the more. So do I believe this? I don't know whether I believe this, but the more benevolent view of it is that it's kind of like an apprentice, right? An apprenticeship model where yes, you are underpaid. You're paid you receive a wage that is barely on the border of livable.
Right.
And the idea is you get intense training that will prepare you for a career as some kind of professional. And so far, is it true? How broadly true is it? I don't really know. What I know is my lab. My students end up all right, whether they end up in academia or not. They end up all right.
Like you can, I bet would I be correct in guessing that the most common non-academic job your graduates have gotten have to do with like data analytics and things like that, research design, research analytics?
My last PhD got a job as a research scientist with the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education.
Okay, that's okay. Yeah,
expression.
I'm sure. Okay, so and I'm guessing they probably have a sufficiently similar mind to you. So yeah, I'm sure they're very happy. Yeah. Okay.
And he got a nice salary, and that I think he was quite happy with, and is actually academic adjacent in that they still want him to do the academic things, publish and peer review and chapters, they also do their own reports, so he has to work on that stuff as well, but he doesn't have to do any teaching. And so far he has been so far it's been kind of his dream job, actually.
Yeah, it sounds
so I feel good about this. Right, this is my student. So like I didn't lead him down some garden path into a dead end, So
yeah, so it's like one of the reasons I left, because as I mentioned earlier, it's like I was studying like language and social conceptual development. And so like, what am I going to offer the free market by saying I've spent the last 8 years studying kids' verb acquisition, generalization? And it's like the main thing that comes up, and like my friend John Wilder, who we've spoken about a bit, he and several of his peers have gone on to data science jobs.
Right.
So the thing is I feel like a disproportionate number of psych grad students don't really like statistics and analysis. They do it because it needs to be done, but that's not why they're there. And so if you were to tell someone, okay, look, that part of the job that you view as a means to an end, that that is kind of that's going to be your whole job now. That would be my worry about that.
So I can't really speak. Well, I can give you one counterexample, but I mostly can't speak to that because I really encourage my students to just really embrace stats and methods. Mm-hmm. And usually when they do, they get a taste for it.
Okay.
Usually. No, not absolutely always, but usually. So one exception was in the 2000s, I had a student who was really smart. I mean, she was just as smart as anybody I've ever met, but she just wasn't into the whole academic thing. She didn't, maybe we had one publication together that she was the third author on or something like that. And she just wasn't into the whole publish or perish academic thing.
Fair enough.
Okay. So you can't I know, right? It is fair, but it's like, what is she going to do? Like, am I just bringing her down a dead end? Okay. She was also a big gamer. I don't do games, video games. This is what she did in her spare time. Big. So she's, finishes her dissertation and she's looking for mostly non-academic jobs. She lands a job as like head of market research for one of the big West Coast gaming companies.
That's awesome.
And she's been there for almost 20 years now. And she recently visited to kind of talk about what it's like outside of academia. And as far as I could tell, she was this is the best decision I ever made.
So in your experience, then, like, you're kind of contradicting me, which is fine. It's actually, I prefer that you're right than I'm right, because my view is very, the world is better if you're right in this situation. So would you say that generally speaking, most of the grad students that you've worked with have gotten to a place that they are not unhappy with it? Like they're pleased.
Yeah, I mean, look, I do think so. Yeah.
That's good. Okay. I'm glad to be wrong in this direction. Yeah, absolutely.
But I'm not saying you're wrong, because writ large, I don't know writ large. Nationwide, might there be more of what you're describing? There might be, actually. But I to some extent, I don't want to worry, and I'm not going to worry about what's going on in University of Montana. I can't really think about that. I can worry about the people in my lab. That's something I can actually do. And so far, it's been pretty good. And because of who I am and how public I am about it, I sort of half joke that I've cornered the market on non-left students in social psychology.
I figured out how to monetize social justice warriors.
Right? Because it's like, where the hell are they going to go and not have to worry about, hiding who they are?
You're actually a safe space for them, like that.
I'm a safe space for them. I am. So this is the thing, because no one else. I have a diversity statement on my faculty page, and it's a very conventional diversity statement, but it includes politics and religion. And so so when undergrads who are not full on the whole progressive worldview come across my page.
Yeah.
They're like, this is a breath of fresh air, and they often apply. And
I bet you probably
they are so good. It's like, oh my God, they are just. This is like one of the best things I've ever done. I didn't do it out of naked self-interest. I did it because it was the right thing to do. But if I had done it out of naked self-interest, it would have been one of the best things that I've ever done. Because the best of these students are coming into my lab, and they are good. And you asked earlier, like, how would things be different? They think differently. They come up with different questions. They study, they raise different issues. Sometimes they study the same things differently, and sometimes they study different things. And it's just a pleasure to be working with these people. And then at my end, now I do, recently over the last 5 years or so, I would talk to them before they come, what do you want to do? I want to go into academia. Well, I know your background. You're here because of who I am. Academia, you're going to have to think long and hard about whether you actually want to go into academia. If you do, I will do everything I can to help you do that. But this is what you're facing. You need to go in with your eyes open. And then I tell them a version of the conversation you and I just had, where I'm like, lots of students are really happy in non-academic jobs, and you should, until you decide, you shouldn't exclude that. You should consider that. So I try to have them come in with their eyes open, but once they're here, part of my job, I can't guarantee anything either, but I think of my job as including helping them launch a satisfying career after they leave. And so far, I've been able to do that. So
you actually just perfectly set me up for the last thing I wanted to talk about. I think I read it. Are you a cyclist?
Yes, I was. It is my second thing after tennis.
So the reason is that this is going to be a metaphor for exactly what we're talking about here. Years ago, so one of my friends was a competitive cyclist and triathlete, and so during all the Lance Armstrong stuff, I remember the whole thing about how he was having certain members of his team purged because they were saying the wrong things about his PED use and such. Yeah. I asked my friend, I'm like, how can they just drop these other members of the team? Doesn't that basically necessarily entail a drop in the quality of the team? Because if the person they're replacing them with is better, they are at the spot. And what he told me was that basically, these weren't his exact words, but there's like a queen bee dynamic where the whole team revolves around the star, and it's almost like most of the rest of them, if not all of them, they're kind of like the drummer or the bass guitarist in a band. They're pretty replaceable. It's not super hard to replace them. That to me seems like a very good analogy to, let's say that you're a grad, like a postdoc or something, and you're applying for the next Rutgers tenure track position, and you're competing against 100 others, but you've got certain wrong opinions. It's like, well, they've got 99 other options with the right opinions, or at least they're hiding their wrong opinions. And so it's like, you're very disposable if you have the wrong opinions.
In the sense that you just described it, that's absolutely true. I think that's absolutely true. That dynamic, though, really screws the field. Because what it does is it effectively purges the field from people who would be more likely to discover and recognize ways in which the dominant claims and some of the dominant claims and conclusions, at least in political or politicized areas, are wrong, overstated, or underqualified.
Right.
And so that dynamic produces a skewed literature, which is one reason why the literature goes wrong. Even without, you don't need replication prices for this. You can say, if it's sort of like the right-wing authoritarianism stuff. If you have 20 studies on implicit bias that make it look like implicit bias is a thing, and there are too few people to produce rigorous, vigorous critiques of it, then it's going to take 30 years to figure out the limitations to implicit bias. Whereas if you had people doing it from the get-go, it might have been realized, 5 years into the development.
It really is bad because it's kind of culling the most important kind of diversity in a university setting, which is different views.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly the most important with respect to political or politicized issues. That's certainly true.
And it's like
for computational models of vision, probably not so much.
Right, and it's like if the person with the wrong opinions is comparably good to a few other applicants, they're not going to get the job probably. They have to be. It's almost like the old show House MD. He was such a dick but he could get away with it because he was such a brilliant doctor that it's like if he was just an average doctor, he would have been fired. But it's because he's so good that like they just put up with him. Like it's like you have to overcome it.
Yeah. That's the deal.
All right, well that's all I've got, man.
And that's it. To see more from this conversation, check out the playlist in the video description. Among the issues we discuss are the infamous social psychology replication crisis, the fraud that was the Stanford prison experiment, ideological bias within the field, and how social psychology has impacted society at large. We also discuss what a conservative social psychologist might look like if one were to ever one day exist. And we discuss politics, the culture war, and how American politics and culture has changed over the past 10 years. If you're looking for more interesting conversation and analysis by a YouTuber who's actually trying to be balanced and constructive, subscribe and show me that I'm far from the only one who's tired of the toxicity.